Tonight, Israel targets Hamas leaders with a missile strike inside the Gulf state of Qatar.
Israel acted wholly independently, and we take full responsibility for this action.
Condemnation from world leaders, including Canada's. Plus, does the attack demolish ceasefire talks, and where does it leave the people of Gaza? Trump's letter to Jeffrey Epstein, new political heat, same White House denials.
It's not my signature, and it's not the way I speak.
And who's got tickets? The World Cup is months away. The chance to see it opens tomorrow.
It's kind of a little bit Hunger Games-ish, where it's everybody for themselves.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thank you for joining us. There are new fears of escalation along with widespread condemnation tonight after an Israeli airstrike inside the country that is attempting to broker a Gaza ceasefire. The attack hit Qatar's capital. The target members of Hamas's leadership. 6 people are said to have died. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now saying there is no immunity for Hamas anywhere. But other world leaders, including Mark Carney, are calling the attack on a sovereign nation intolerable. So we'll take you inside Jerusalem tonight, where reaction is clearly divided. But first, Paul Hunter on how the strike unfolded and the fierce criticism that followed.
Caught on cell phone cam, smoke billowing on the horizon, and on silent security video from the moment of impact, the stunning Israeli strike into the heart of Doha's diplomatic quarter, targeting the leadership of Hamas within Qatar's capital. Israel's prime minister was clear.
Israel acted wholly independently, and we take full responsibility for this action.
Hamas, which has used Doha as a base from which to negotiate an end to its war with Israel, said while a number of its members were killed and wounded, the Hamas leadership survived, said a spokesman. But that Israel struck inside Qatar, a sovereign state, longtime U.S. ally, and facilitator in ceasefire negotiations with Hamas, sent shockwaves. Qatar called the strike a blatant violation of international law, adding there must be a response from the entire region. And from Qatari state television, Qatar won't deal lightly with this reckless Israeli behavior. Indeed, condemnation was broad. Prime Minister Mark Carney called the violence intolerable, said France the strike was unacceptable, said the UK it risks further escalation. The UN labeled it a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty.
All parties must work towards achieving a permanent ceasefire, not destroying it.
This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha.
Notified not by Israel, but the Pentagon, said White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, adding that the strike
does not advance Israel or America's goals.
All of it a day after a Hamas attack in Jerusalem, where gunmen opened fire on a crowded bus, killing at least 6. And while inside Gaza City, as Israel threatens an expanded ground operation and is ordering a total evacuation, Palestinians dig for the dead after the latest Israeli bombardment there. We don't know what to do, said Ahmed Kanaita. There's no civil defense, no paramedics, there's nothing.
And just back to Donald Trump, Adrian, he emphasized in a post on his Truth Social site today that the strike was, quote, not a decision made by me.
Okay, so he took issue with the location, but it seems he was perfectly fine with the targets.
Yeah, look, he wrote in that same post that eliminating Hamas is a worthy goal. But he also underlined that the U.S. tried to alert Qatar to the strike, but that it was too late, and he feels badly about that, writing he's told Qatar such a thing will never happen again on their soil, saying explicitly this evening the U.S. had no advance warning from Israel on this, and he's very unhappy with the way it all went down.
All right, Paul Hunter in Washington. Let's go straight to Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem. That is where 6 people were killed just one day ago in an attack celebrated by Hamas. And Sasha, Israel's prime minister made direct reference to that.
That's right, Adrian. Netanyahu called that a terror attack, and he said it was the final straw. But from the start, Netanyahu's hardline coalition partners and his supporters have been pushing for that kind of total victory at any cost, not some kind of deal at the negotiating table. And while the world might be condemning this attack, many here are actually cheering it.
But Sasha, this could affect the fate of the remaining hostages, no? What are people saying there?
Well, you know, a real split is emerging among Israelis. The tens of thousands who have been out on the streets demanding some kind of a deal to get those hostages released, they are afraid that this is going to be some kind of a death sentence. After all, there are believed to be 20 living hostages still inside Gaza. On the other hand, there are many others who are cheering this Israel's show of force here. Really, it's chutzpah.
All right, Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem. Thank you. The strike in Qatar marks yet another flashpoint for Israeli military action across the Middle East. Conflicts both long-standing and more recent on top of the one with Hamas in Gaza. Off and on combat with the Houthis in Yemen. Cross-border fighting in Lebanon with Hezbollah, including devastating Israeli pager attacks. In Syria, Israel has launched what it called preemptive strikes. Syria said those violated international law. And Israel has also directly engaged with Iran as well, culminating in this year's 12-day war. Iran accused of funding many of Israel's enemies, and now it's Qatar. A targeted strike widely condemned, but what happens next? So a little later in the show, we will dig deeper into that question when I'm joined by international relations expert Janice Stein, plus a look at Qatar's place in global affairs. Now, here in Canada, a group that has been known to remain anonymous stepped out into the open over the Labor Day long weekend. A self-described men's nationalist organization rallied in an Ontario park. Thomas Daig now on new concerns about extremism and anti-immigrant rhetoric.
The crowd of masked men dressed in black came to be heard, taking over this Niagara Park for a rare public rally.
Canada is being pillaged, raped, and burned!
Calling themselves Second Sons and billing their group as a Canadian men's nationalist club.
What is your fear about where this could lead to?
Well, definitely violence. I think the Second Sons have said that they're not just a social club.
Their leader, Jeremy Mackenzie, seen here doing what appears to be a Nazi salute. He also founded Diagolon, considered by police an extremist militia-like group. Below a monument for Major General Isaac Brock, who died fighting back an invasion of Canada in 1812, Mackenzie questions the modern definition of Canadian.
Now we are told that name belongs to anyone and everyone who comes here.
They push the idea that white individuals are being replaced. So they are somewhat of a militia prepared to fight to save Canada and its heritage.
Second Sons and other self-described active clubs train together in gyms and boxing rings. CBC's Visual Investigations Unit determined this recent session was held at an Ontario Lions Club community center.
The Lions Club tells CBC News it wouldn't have approved the rental if it knew about the true nature of the group hosting an event here. Second Sons is advertising gatherings across the country.
The group claiming it has members in multiple provinces. Their faces always kept hidden.
These groups are gaining momentum, and this is something worrying.
Police say they were called to this park, but the group left before officers arrived. Pictures shared online show military-like drills, even a casualty evacuation exercise, as if perhaps to say, a battle is coming. Thomas Daig, CBC News, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario.
Ontario's premier is calling for municipalities to remove speed cameras, calling them a tax grab.
I'm all about public safety. I'm against taxing the death out of people.
Police say 16 cameras were damaged in Toronto, and that comes just 2 days after another was vandalized in the city's West End. It has been repeatedly targeted since it was installed in 2022 after a speeding motorist killed an elderly couple. Toronto's mayor says cameras make the roads safer.
We know that these cameras save lives. These cameras make sure people obey the laws and not speed in a way that is illegal.
The mayor referred to a recent study from Toronto Sick Kids Hospital that says the cameras significantly reduce speeding. Meantime, police say they are working to track down those responsible for vandalizing them. And the mayor of Barrie, Ontario, has declared a state of emergency because of homeless encampments in that city. He is blaming what he calls an increase in lawlessness. Ithil Musa now with the escalation from the mayor and the possible fallout.
It's encampments like this that has Barrie's mayor taking action.
We've had to today declare a state of emergency.
Alex Nuttall says it's all about reclaiming the city's streets. The declaration will allow city staff to quickly tear down encampments and hire contractors to help with the city's response, including more supports.
Social services, those are provided by Simcoe County, not by the city of Barrie, as mandated by the provincial government. And so what this allows us to do is to be in charge of that.
Nuttall says the encampments have brought a sense of lawlessness, and he attributed a host of other issues to them, like increased E. coli levels in a local waterway and what he calls rampant drug use. Earlier this year, 2 men who lived inside an encampment were killed and dismembered. The accused also once lived among them.
These are bad things, and they make people uneasy and uncomfortable. And we're going to move to restore that order.
But one advocate says those committing illegal acts are few in number, and the focus should remain on finding longer-term solutions.
We have a housing and homelessness crisis that needs to be addressed, and we're seeing more and more people and more demand on shelter systems, which is not the final solution for people. We need more housing, we need some more supports.
Since the pandemic, cities across the country have been grappling with growing encampments. New Ontario legislation passed this summer gives municipalities and police more tools to dismantle encampments in parks and public spaces, like here in front of Barrie's courthouse.
It's a representation of our country, and at the same time, we see problems right in front of the courthouse, which is kind of ironic.
The mayor is encouraging those living in tents to seek out the new supports provided by the city, because he says no matter what, the encampments are coming down. Ithil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
We now know the identity of another Canadian killed in Lisbon earlier this month in that funicular rail crash. Aziz Ben Harif was from Ottawa. He was vacationing with his wife, Hind Egernon, who was also on the tram and is still in hospital with some serious injuries. 16 people were killed when the historic rail car, popular with tourists, careened down a hill and crashed. A couple from Quebec is also among the dead. Well, Nepal's prime minister has stepped down in response to violent protests in the country's capital, led by young people angered by a social media ban. The protests exploded into a broader revolt that turned deadly. Crystal Gaman Singh has more on what is driving the ongoing unrest.
Engulfed in smoke as the Nepalese parliament burned, anti-corruption demonstrators celebrated. They succeeded in forcing Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli to resign Tuesday, along with 2 of his cabinet ministers. To our now former Prime Minister, I must say that the resignation from your post is not enough, says this student protester. Clashes between mostly young demonstrators and police continued even after the government lifted its ban on social media. Protesters want an end to what they say is a corrupt government rife with nepotism and unwilling to address a failing economy. At least 22 people have been killed and hundreds injured. Nepal's army accuses protesters of taking advantage of the crisis by looting and setting fires. But ignoring an indefinite curfew, protests intensified.
People are just furious.
Nirnaya Bata witnessed the anger on the streets firsthand. He says the social media ban lit the fuse.
I think the need now is, utter sincerity, from the state, from the government, and anybody who actually is at the helm of, running the country.
Nepal became a democratic republic in 2008. In the process, thousands died as political groups fought the monarchy, the police, military, and each other for control. Nepal's Army Chief of Staff noted the bloodshed past and present as he called for unity, asking demonstrators to cancel future actions and engage in talks. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
More questions tonight about U.S. President Donald Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The contents of a 50th birthday present to Epstein have been released, including what was earlier reported to be a letter from Trump. But as Katie Simpson shows us, he is again denying he wrote it.
The slow drip of new information about Donald Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein hanging over the White House.
Good afternoon, everybody.
As his team urgently tries to dismiss and discredit anyone questioning the president.
The Democrats view this story as nothing more than an attempt to distract from the accomplishments and the achievements of this administration. And that is what we mean when we call it a hoax.
This is the latest frustration. A newly released copy of a sexually suggestive note Trump allegedly gave Epstein for a 50th birthday book. A woman's naked body outlining what appears to be a mock conversation between friends, ending with "May every day be another wonderful secret," and what appears to be Trump's signature. The book released by lawmakers after obtaining it from the Epstein estate.
It's not my signature, and it's not the way I speak. That's not my language. It's nonsense. And frankly, you're wasting your time.
The Trump administration is also denying his involvement with this page in the birthday book, a photo with an oversized check and a handwritten note appearing to joke about Epstein selling a fully depreciated woman to Donald Trump.
Well, look, we say where there's smoke, there's fire. And when it comes to Trump and Epstein, there's more smoke than at a Texas barbecue.
The book includes other graphic images. This drawing from an unknown author showing Epstein giving young girls balloons in 1983 and then appearing to be getting a massage by young women 20 years later.
Getting the truth to the American people about
Lawmakers are promising to uncover more files any way possible.
We've got a lot more documents we expect to get in. We're going to bring a lot of people in for depositions. So this investigation is moving along very rapidly, and hopefully we'll get some answers and some justice very soon.
Trump was asked whether he would be open to meeting with Epstein victims, to which he told reporters he hadn't thought about it. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
CBC News is on board a Canadian Navy ship in the Arctic as the crew practices hunting down an increasing threat.
How do you actually proceed now?
So now that we've been tasked for it, we're going to go and take a look and try and find this person.
Exclusive access inside the military exercise unfolding in Canada's north. Next. FIFA fans are about to get their first shot at scoring a ticket to the World Cup.
It's kind of a little bit Hunger Games-ish, where it's everybody for themselves.
And after losing his house in a fire, a life-changing stroke of luck.
It's changed more than one life, this raffle.
We're back in 2 minutes. Officials say nearly 70 shipping containers fell off a cargo ship that came from China, tumbling into the water at one of the busiest ports in the United States. That temporarily stopped operations at the terminal in Long Beach, California. There were no reported injuries. And now to a CBC News exclusive and a look into a strategic Canadian military operation. The goal is to assert sovereignty in the Arctic, where critical mineral deposits have piqued the interest of nations like Russia and China. David Common saw it all up close on board a naval patrol vessel.
You look and check all the inlets and basically flesh out the small vessels.
On board one of the Canadian Navy's newest vessels, a search has just been launched. The crew, joined by a Coast Guard helicopter, combing these vast Arctic waters for a small vessel that doesn't want to be found. How do you actually proceed now?
So now that we've been tasked for it, we're going to go and take a look and try and find this person.
This is only a practice scenario, but Commander Scott Kellerman makes sure his crew treats it like it's real.
It could be something that could be very challenging to find.
Then we'll be able to go in with our small boats and the RCMP detachment.
This is not some far-fetched scenario. Just this summer, Canada launched surveillance aircraft to monitor the Zhulong 2, a Chinese vessel purportedly for research, but it's also believed to have military application. An independent researcher also tracked a Canadian Coast Guard vessel mirroring that Chinese icebreaker's transit. While last summer, it was Canada's Navy shadowing a Chinese vessel.
These research vessels have a wide range of purposes, some of which may not exactly be in Canadian interests.
For instance, another Chinese ship crossed Canada's Northwest Passage in 2017. It would be capable of mapping the sea floor to create maps for future surreptitious travel by Chinese submarines, as well as to identify vast critical mineral reserves in the Arctic.
We have located the VOI. We will be closing it in the next 90 minutes.
Back on board the ship in Nunavut, the suspect vessel has been located. And the Navy moving to intercept, sending 2 RCMP officers. Could they be looking at a sensitive military site? Is it just people we don't know? And so that vessel that's going very fast there now has the RCMP on board, and they're going to go to intercept and possibly arrest those on shore. On arrival, the Mounties approach, meeting a group of Inuit people who are assisting in the simulation. They then proceed to make arrests. In this scenario, the Coast Guard members playing potential spies found with Russian military intelligence ID. David Common, CBC News, Eclipse Sound, Nunavut.
The competition to snag a ticket to the World Cup is about to get underway.
I think that this phase is your biggest chance as a fan to get a real face value ticket.
What it could take for soccer fans to secure a seat. Next. Canada is among the countries condemning Israel's strike on Doha. We break down why Hamas leaders are in Qatar and what could happen next. And when it comes to the war in Ukraine, is Putin calling Trump's bluff?
While Trump has been attempting to end the war in Ukraine, Putin has been escalating it. Let's try to understand why.
The National takes you deeper into the stories shaping our world. Next. Tennis Canada says the Davis Cup tie between Canada and Israel will be closed to spectators. The match is set for Friday and Saturday at Halifax's Scotiabank Centre. The organization cites escalating safety concerns and intelligence received from local authorities and national security agencies. The decision comes after more than 400 Canadian athletes and academics urged Tennis Canada to cancel over Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank. A pro-Palestinian protest is planned to coincide with the match. Well, tomorrow, the first pre-sale for 2026 FIFA World Cup tickets begins. Canada, the U.S., and Mexico are hosting, with 13 games to be played in this country. Jamie Strachan guides us through the ticketing process that will have fans crossing their fingers.
25-plus yards out.
Across the ocean, Canada's men's team is preparing for next summer's World Cup.
Oh, wow! Derek Cornelius! Take a bow, son!
Back in Canada, fans are figuring out how to buy tickets.
I think that this phase is your biggest chance as a fan to get a real face value ticket. This is all that's available at the moment.
Superfan Azaz Sheikh, like all Canadians, will have their first chance to purchase tickets Wednesday. Here's how it works. If you're a Visa card holder, you can enter a draw to buy tickets between September 10th and 19th. About 1 million tickets will be sold as part of this phase, and winners will be notified by September 29th. Then, beginning October 1st, can purchase up to 4 tickets for as many as 10 matches.
We're really lucky because we know Canada will be in certain games, but I think there's 60-something games in that first round. Almost all the rest of them, you don't know who's going to be playing.
Boylan will pick the ball inside.
For other Canadians, 2 additional phases will operate in a similar fashion, one from October to December and another after the final draw is decided. Games will be played in stadiums in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Only the dates of the host country's games are known.
Everybody's going to want these, including us.
Right here.
The president of the Voyageurs, Canada Soccer's main supporter group, knows it'll be a tough ticket, even for the most ardent fans.
It's kind of a little bit Hunger Games-ish, where it's everybody for themselves and trying to get these tickets to these games, and they're limited.
Canada Soccer also has a small allotment of tickets for games Canada is playing in, available to Canadian fans through a lottery.
There's much more demand than there will be supply. It's going to introduce a scarcity that I think people really haven't experienced before in Canadian soccer.
FIFA said prices will start at $82 for some group stage tickets and climb to $9,200 for the final. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. Despite threats from the U.S. president, Moscow's attacks on Ukraine keep escalating.
Donald Trump, we hear time and again, threatening consequences, but then not following through.
We break down the reasons Vladimir Putin seems confident, ignoring Washington's wishes. But first, another conflict Trump vowed to end quickly, and another dangerous escalation. Israel launches a deadly strike on Hamas leaders at their headquarters in Qatar. So let's break down the possible fallout from this attack. CBC's Evan Dyer starts us off by showing why Hamas leaders are headquartered in Qatar, a close ally of the U.S.
October 7th, 2023, Hamas leaders are learning or pretending to learn about the attack on southern Israel for the first time. They include then-leader Ismail Haniyeh and Khalil al-Hayya, the target of today's attack, all gathered in Doha, Qatar. The Israelis eventually killed Haniyeh, but they did it while he was visiting Iran, not in Qatar.
The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack.
It's not the who, but the where of this attack that represents an escalation.
When the Hamas office was opened in Qatar several years ago, it was done with the very explicit support of the US and Israel. It was not done against their wishes.
Tiny Qatar is not only home to the leadership of Hamas, it also hosts the headquarters of US Central Command and the largest airbase in the Middle East. And those aren't the only strange bedfellows. The Sheraton Doha is where the US negotiated its withdrawal from Afghanistan with the Taliban, who also have an office there.
Qatar has also made the decision that given its physical vulnerability as a tiny flat country, sandwiched between Iran and Saudi Arabia, that the best way to ensure its security would be to make itself indispensable. That's why it is hosting the largest US military base in the Middle East. That's why it has played that role of mediator, not only between Israel and Hamas, but within multiple other conflicts as well.
The latest strike could make Qatar reconsider that role.
One option is that Qatar walks away from its mediation role, specifically with regards to Hamas, and then the Hamas political office, or whatever is left of it after the strike, leaves, goes perhaps to Turkey or to Iran.
That would make future ceasefire talks harder, but then that may have been one of the purposes of the attack.
The Netanyahu administration is committed to a plan that it has stated publicly and that is closely coordinated with the Trump administration to conquer and take over Gaza and ethnically cleanse the population that lives there. And so if you have a diplomatic settlement that calls for a ceasefire, an exchange of hostages, that doesn't advance that broader goal that Netanyahu is clearly committed to. So you kill the peace negotiators.
Qatar is in no position to retaliate militarily against Israel, but it may have few options other than to continue to serve the interests of larger powers as the only way to protect itself in a neighborhood full of predators. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Let's bring in Janice Stein, founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs, one of the most well-connected analysts in this country. Janice, Israel's strike in Qatar. What's the strategy there?
The strategy makes no sense to me whatsoever, Adrian. By bombing in the home country of the mediator, Israel annoyed the President of the United States, embarrassed him. That is their only remaining superpower friend.
And does this accomplish anything?
Well, what it does clearly is take Qatar out for now as a mediator and shut down this round of negotiations and kill the deal that Donald Trump had put on the table. I was never very optimistic about it, but this kills that deal.
Okay, why would you do that?
I think at this point, the Prime Minister of Israel is more afraid of a negotiated settlement, a prolonged settlement with a commitment to stay in the process, than he is about continuing and eliminating so-called the last stronghold of Hamas. I don't think that will work either.
So you said that this pulls Qatar out of the negotiating role. Who steps in?
There's no question that Egypt will step in. There have to be negotiations for this to end. And what we are seeing, Adrian, is a much greater alignment. All the Arab countries, and I think even this Prime Minister of Israel understands we're approaching the end game here.
All day we've been hearing reaction to the strike, condemnation from countries around the world, including from the US president. But condemnation without consequences, do those words then have any currency at all?
They really don't, Adrian, and even the condemnation was qualified. The president talked about how disappointed he was, but then finished up by saying, but eliminating Hamas is a worthy goal. So it was qualified condemnation with absolutely no action to follow.
Does that make it just performative?
Yes. Much about what we saw in the last week or so is performative. I think the chances of a deal were very low. I think Hamas met to consider a deal that it knew it would not accept. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu himself did not want this deal. There was performance everywhere.
What would it take for there to be actual consequences, do you think?
The United States would have to slow down or stop the supply of military equipment to Israel. That would matter.
No sign that's happening?
No sign whatsoever that's happening.
One of the things you're very, very good at is looking ahead. So your sense of the next move that we might see here from Qatar, from Israel, or from Hamas?
I think the next move will be, tragically, an accelerated offensive in Gaza City. I think the Egyptians will step in and the Emiratis will step in to push Hamas as hard as it can to actually agree to a ceasefire. And the next round of negotiations will be led by Egypt.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says, you know, this could open the door to the end of the war. Could it?
That's what he thinks, because he thinks he can eliminate the remaining military leaders of Hamas. I think that's a fantasy, Adrian. For every leader that is so-called eliminated, there are 10 behind. But I do think there are growing pressures on Netanyahu from inside the country to end this, as well as pressures from the United States, and the Arab countries are beginning to relentlessly pressure Hamas. That's what matters.
Okay. Janice Stein, thank you.
You're welcome.
Coming up, Moscow increases attacks on Ukraine while some blame a weakened White House position for the escalation.
Trump is not going for the all-in sort of thing like the Biden.
Why Vladimir Putin seems to be ignoring American demands for peace. That's next. An escalation of Russian attacks on Ukraine, apparently in direct defiance of a U.S. president pushing for peace.
I am not happy with them. I'm not happy with anything having to do with that war.
The Kremlin seemingly uninterested in bending to the will of the White House.
There hasn't been any real pressure exerted on Russia that would try to deter it from carrying out these attacks.
Andrew Chang, host of About That, examines why Vladimir Putin is in a position to call Donald Trump's bluff on Ukraine.
This building in Kiev has the most generic name imaginable. In Ukrainian, it's simply the government building. But I'm showing it to you for two reasons. One, it is the political heart of the country, where you'll find the cabinet of ministers, effectively the government. But two, right now, there's a huge hole in it.
The capital in Kyiv has been rocked by explosions after a series of Russian missile and drone attacks.
In one of the most heavily defended parts of the country, something flew through that upper wall, setting Ukraine's executive seat of power on fire. Was it a drone, a missile? Impossible to say, in part because this was just one casualty of a Russian attack that, according to Ukraine's Air Force, included more than 800 drones and 13 missiles. Ukraine's president says Kyiv, the capital, was the primary target, but that drones and missiles hit dozens of locations throughout the country. Even some drones that were intercepted crashed and caused damage below, which officials say may have been what happened at Ukraine's government building. Not only is that a target Russia has never hit before, more broadly, this weekend's attack was the largest Russia has ever launched against Ukraine during this war.
It was a shocking wave of Russian aggression.
It's being seen as a message from Moscow.
Consider how Russia has become more aggressive over time, unleashing bigger and bigger salvos of drones and missiles. That data has been tracked and compiled here by the Institute for the Study of War. Then consider what else has happened over this same time span. Donald Trump's inauguration, his phone calls with Vladimir Putin, ongoing talks, more phone calls, more talks. While Trump has been attempting to end the war in Ukraine, Putin has been escalating it. Let's try to understand why. What Putin understands about Trump's position on Ukraine is that there is a great big chasm between what Ukraine needs and what Trump is willing to provide.
The United States has given $350 billion because we had a stupid, incompetent president and administration.
Trump is not going for the all-in sort of thing like Biden. Ukraine's defense is our defense. Trump says none of that stuff.
Here's how U.S. military spending on Ukraine has changed over time. For most of the war, Joe Biden was president. But this stretch here, Trump has been in command. It was under his leadership Europe's military contribution to Ukraine's defense began to outpace that of the United States. And as the Trump administration's interest in arming Ukraine for its own sake has waned, Zelensky's position has grown more and more dire, his demands more and more urgent. Because he knows one way to stop Russia's advance is to hit back, to strike Russia itself. But another way, as we began to see over the last year in Zelensky's pleas for help, is to threaten a blow so severe, Russia would have no choice but to stop its war.
Putin and those around him can look at what Donald Trump has done since arriving in office and consider themselves fairly comfortable in their position of continuing the war. There hasn't been any real pressure exerted on Russia that would try to deter it from carrying out these attacks.
And think about how Russia's war machine has ramped up. Ukrainian military intelligence believes Russia is capable of producing up to 2,700 attack drones a month, the very same type believed to have been used in the most recent attack on Kyiv. And that figure doesn't even include the many decoys that get sent with every attack to soak up Ukrainian anti-air defenses. If you do the math, that means the kind of record-setting attack Russia just pulled off on Ukraine, it could conceivably launch every 10 days without any decoys. Putin also knows the U.S. is officially leaving the business of providing weapons to Ukraine directly, opting instead to serve as a kind of global arms dealer.
In a nutshell, we're going to make top-of-the-line weapons, and they'll be sent to NATO.
Trump's most recent position is that NATO countries should buy from the U.S. the weapons Ukraine needs, and it would be on them to then deliver those weapons to Ukraine. With strings attached or not, let them decide.
Billions of dollars worth of military equipment is going to be purchased from the United States, going to NATO, etc. And that's going to be quickly distributed to the battlefield.
The Americans are not spending a dime. The Americans are making profit.
And the other thing Putin understands is that so far, the bulk of what the U.S. is willing to provide, even through this new arrangement, is purely defensive. Patriot missile batteries designed to shoot down incoming threats.
These systems will save lives in Ukraine, in the cities, in Kyiv and in Kharkiv, for instance, but it's not going to allow Ukraine to recapture territory.
And that's an important distinction Putin will be well aware of, that American military aid may slow Russia's advance without undoing it. When Joe Biden was president, he really leaned in on a moral argument that the world has a duty to defend Ukraine.
We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine.
It's a message that resonates, I think, from a historical perspective, and maybe it carries weight with America's allies. But the framing hasn't really stuck as an imperative for many Americans themselves. Now, a Gallup poll from just this past August did suggest Democrats' view of the war is largely unchanged, pretty much since the start up until today. About 80% supporting Ukraine in reclaiming territory Russia has captured, even if it results in a more prolonged conflict. But look at this same question asked of Republicans this time. What started off as a nearly 50-50 split when Russia first invaded now shows about 69% of respondents thinking the US should try and end the conflict as quickly as possible, even if it means allowing Russia to keep territory it has captured.
So what you have in American public opinion now is the divide over historical American perceptions about foreign policy interests.
It's also important to consider how this divide, there's a geographic dimension to it too, right? Ukraine's far away. It's not exactly on America's front doorstep. It's not part of NATO, and it's simply not seen as some kind of vital foothold for US security. Putin will understand strategically that it's just hard for many Americans to incorporate Ukraine into their day-to-day concerns when any number of issues, from inflation to immigration, crime to corruption, they all just occupy so much of the American consciousness. Not to mention, the very international order a defense of Ukraine would seek to uphold is the thing Trump often appears more than willing to withdraw from.
We are witnessing the foundations, the pillars of the liberal international system collapse. I think that Trump has come to the conclusion that system wasn't working anymore. And as a consequence, he's sort of said, we're not going to think about the world in autocracy versus democracy. He's hearkening back to a much earlier era in American statecraft in which the United States went it alone. And I think he has in his mind a view of the world in which countries are sovereign, self-regarding, motivated by their own interests.
And of course, there are other factors too. We've done explainers on Russian resilience, its ability to sell oil despite US sanctions, to find friends among those who sometimes count themselves as foes to the US, and to continue pumping soldiers into the so-called meat grinder, winning the war of attrition with manpower, Russian or not. But that goes hand in hand with a world where Americans are increasingly frustrated at a war that just won't end, where Trump has, at least so far, seemed unwilling or unable to back Putin into enough of a corner that would stop him from fighting until the bloodiest end, and where the prevailing notion in the United States of putting America first, maybe that's Putin's greatest edge of all.
Now, officials from the EU are in Washington this week, reportedly working with the U.S. on a new round of sanctions against Russia. For its part, the Kremlin claims that no sanctions would ever force Russia to change course. Well, when we come back, talk about a much-needed win after losing everything in a house fire.
Somebody said to me today, you're the most unluckiest person I know.
Now, you're not kidding. How a raffle prize is helping give a PEI man a second chance. Next. So that's Daniel Drouin on the left, and he just caught a stroke of luck. He has won a new cottage in a raffle draw. So here's the thing, that win comes just over a month after his house burnt down. So tonight, this timely twist of fate makes our moment.
Somebody said to me today, you're the most unluckiest person I know. Back in June, my girlfriend and I went and looked at the Big Brothers Big Sisters dream cottage. So I bought a ticket, never thought nothing of it. The last day of July, I'd gotten a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. My son called, hysterical, saying the house was on fire. The house is only minutes away from the fire department. But at that point in time, it was fully engulfed. We lost everything. That led us up to Friday that just passed. I got a call and I looked at the phone. It's Myron Yates, Executive Director at Big Brothers Big Sisters.
I have some good news for you. You're the winner.
Are you kidding?
No.
You gotta be kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
My house is gone. Now I have a house. Like, what are the odds? It was a bit small for my family's needs. So there was a cash option as well. I have a house lined up to buy, and I couldn't thank everybody enough. It's changed more than one life, this raffle.
Sometimes luck just lands. So he said he thought that call was a prank. Obviously, mercifully, it was not a prank. It was a real deal. And getting the opportunity to have a place to live again means that not only will there be a roof, but the family will be able to be together again. It's exactly what he needed. For everyone here at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.